Now, knowing that the African continent in general is losing $90 billion per year, and knowing also that when trying to restrict, this illegal outflow of money to some specific countries, according to the last book, called, let me try and find the name of that book. It's called On the Trade of Capital Flight from Africa. It was actually published, in 2022, and it was written by a former, professional at the African Development Bank. His name is Leonce Ndikumana, and it was written by him and his team of experts. And they found out that, Angola, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa, has lost, thanks to illegal outflow of money, $60 billion per year. And like I said in part 2 of my analysis, when you try and, times that by 50, that gives on average $1 trillion, illegal outflow of money from every specific country. Now that you know that, okay, you know that some countries are losing $20 billion, and you also know that what you need to actually develop and build an oil refinery is between $15 to $25. When you also know that you can easily have manufacture with $10 billion, with $20 billion, even with $100 billion, now that you know that, do you think, honestly, in your honest opinion, deep down, do you think that the reason why your country is underdeveloped, do you think the reason why your country is not able to transform its own production of cocoa, its own production of coffee, its own production of pineapple, do you know, or do you think that the reason why your country, is not even able, to capitalize on the river, the lake that it has to produce an optimal level of electricity? Do you think that the reason why you have to, to pay sometimes twice or 10 times the amount, to actually travel from your capital, the capital to a rural area simply because there's no road? Do you think that it is because your country cannot access finance? Or do you think that it's because your country is financially poor? Honestly, I'm very curious about your position here. Tell me honestly. After listening to part 1 and part 2, and also after making your personal research and sharing your personal knowledge on the topic around fund embezzlement in Africa, what do you think? Do you think that the reason why you cannot go to a public hospital when you're sick is because your country is poor financially? Well, you know my position already, and I'm very curious and keen, to find out about yours. So I continue discussing this very interesting topic because fund embezzlement is not just about knowing how much money exactly is being illegally, moved out the continent. It's not just about knowing the exact amount of dollars that the African continent is losing per year or per minute or per second. Because there's one thing, knowing or having the information and doing something with the information that you know. So now we know that we're losing this, but why it is important to know? What are the impact of fund embezzlement in Africa? Well, I can think of only one thing. It has a serious destabilizing effect. Seriously, beyond any jokes, beyond any jokes. Let's be very serious here. Fund embezzlement is very destabilizing for your economy, for the African continent. And it's very disturbing because now you are in a context, you are in an environment where other country or other government, you are going out there to the international market to actually apply for development finance. You apply for development finance under the pretenses that you are going to finance a public infrastructure that's going to impact positively, the life of your people. That project is supposed to somehow generate jobs, to create employment, to improve the social welfare, the health welfare, the economic welfare of your people, which in turn will also help, increase and improve your GDP condition. I don't know if you understand. Okay, let me make it even simpler. What I'm saying here is that most of the time when government, get access to development finance, when they get access to money to actually build roads or to build schools or even hospitals, like whatever public project you can think of, it's because they actually submit a project document, and the project document, meets the internal criteria of the lenders. And after that, the second thing you also need to keep in mind is that we're talking about a loan, and a loan has to be repaid. And you repay the loan based on your revenue projection, your revenue capacity, which means that if you're going out there and you are applying for a loan under the pretenses that you are going to build a bridge, you've already made your background analysis knowing that thanks to that bridge, you are going to be able to improve, the movement of people within a specific environment. And thanks to that improvement, people will now be able to reach their jobs, to actually have access to professional opportunities quicker and faster. And in turn, this will have a strong impact in your national revenue production. People are going to be more productive, businesses are going to thrive, and stuff like that, which in turn will have a positive impact in your fiscal policy, your fiscal revenue collection, and your fiscal objective. So if you're earning more money, you are now going to be able to repay back the loan, easily and without putting your national economy, in constraint. So what happens when there's fund embezzlement is now you are applying and you are getting the loan under the false pretense of building the bridge. And the bridge is supposed to be built over 3 years, for instance. And instead of 3 years, it takes 10 to 30 years. But on the other hand, you are losing on the projected revenue, but you still have to repay the loan. So this situation of fund embezzlement is no longer beneficial, not just to the country, but to the citizens themselves, because now you are putting an extra fiscal pressure on them and on your fiscal administration. And now you are in a position where it's very difficult. Life becomes very costly. Life opportunities become very scarce. The private sector is no longer enticed to creating jobs because they can now feel the fiscal pressure. And now more and more people, find themselves jobless. But still, the country has to meet its international obligation. And one of the most important obligations is to repay the loan. You have to pay it back. So the reason why I decided to discuss about fund embezzlement in 3 parts is because it's a topic that matters personally to me. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African Talks. I'm S.I.K.A, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, well, I'm happy to have you, and this podcast is strictly dedicated to development, politics, and environment talks that actually have a strong impact in Africa's development. So if you're keen, all you have to do is to click on the subscribe button, and you will join the community and the family of young African intellectuals and people with a strong passion for Africa's development. So, as I was saying, fund embezzlement is very destabilizing for your domestic economy, and it's very destabilizing for the African continent because it actually puts the continent and the country on a path where credit no longer becomes productive to the economy. I don't know if you get my point. It puts the continent and some specific African countries in a condition where whatever development finance they access to does not help them reach their development goals, or does not help them reach their development goals based on the development timelines they actually submitted. Because if you're going to take on like 30 years to build one bridge instead of doing it in 3 years, you've lost 27 years. And you've lost 27 years where you could have been developing more bridges or developing other economic sectors and improving also your national revenue collection system, your national revenue, collection level and stuff like that. So this is the first and the foremost impact, you need to consider. And it is never, like a good thing to encourage, fund embezzlement, because in the long run, it does not benefit the country. So when my fellow ministers, Mamadou, Pedro, and Sepo told me that they did not have access to finance, my next question was to try and understand, well, there are countries like Angola, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa that have been losing $60 billion a year for 50 years. Now that the information is out there, now that you have the information, what exactly are you trying or are you doing to make sure that you can repatriate those funds and make sure that they can benefit your country? So that's where they couldn't answer me anymore. They were literally speechless. And they were saying that, of course, this is a solution or this is an option we may consider in the future, but they've never even considered that option. And you see, this is what I told you. When having the information, what do you do with the information? So many African countries claim that it's challenging, it's difficult to have access to finance. While on the other hand, first, when having access to finance, they fail to actually put in place a proper environment and proper mechanisms to monitor, to manage properly and transparently whatever public amount that they have to manage. The second shortfall is that when losing the money, sometimes they do not even consider starting a process, to get it back, because money never gets lost. And that's the beauty when it comes to, the formal financial system. With the formal financial system, finances never get lost. You may actually not use it for its proper purpose. You may embezzle it sometimes. But if the next guy or if the next administration, to actually seize power is really serious about getting the money back, making everything within their power to make sure that they can retrieve at least a sizable, portion of the lost money, they will definitely succeed at doing so. And I'm going to give you a very specific example with a specific country. It's a country we love, all of us. I mean, they've been making amazing music. They also have been making amazing movies. They are very, very interesting. It's a country that makes you very proud of being an African nowadays. But the rest of African countries, it still has its own evil to fight and combat. And, fund embezzlement is one of them. But it's been trying, to set itself, on the right path. And in the next episode, I will happily be discussing, this case study of one West African countries that just not stopped at having the information of knowing that the country lost several $billions, but instead it took an active and a proactive approach to try and get back some of the money and to also be able, to reinvest it, to put it back within the public sector. Yeah, this is definitely the end of this very interesting topic around fund embezzlement in Africa. And remember, like I said, this is not an issue proper to the African continent. It is proper to the international community. And you can think of the recent, situation with S.I.K.A. Unfortunately, I cannot comment on this because, it is not within the scope of this podcast, but like I'll try and find a way to make it relevant for Africa, and I can think of something. But overall, I want you to understand that now it's very important, for this generation, our generation of young African intellectual, because we are next in line. We will definitely be, presiding over the fate of our countries and presiding over the fate of our beautiful Africa. So it is now that we should learn and try and not replicate the same mistake, and make sure that, even if it's difficult to eradicate, we can actually create the right tools. We can create the right mechanisms to monitor, to control, and to reduce, the negative impact as much as possible. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you enjoyed this last part. Let me know what you think of the episode overall, the topic overall, sorry. Let me know also your country, where you're from, whether your country's been struggling with embezzlement. That will be very cool to know and to learn more from each other. Thank you for listening to your favorite podcast, S.I.K.A Talks, the only podcast where strong ideas meet powerful perspectives. À bientôt.